when you think about what blockchain technology is doing, it is putting into place via the internet the payments ecosystem that was not put in place in the early days of the internet because it was never conceived with commerce in mind. It was for defense departments and intelligence. It was for academics. It was for information exchange, not commerce. When you fill in the picture with blockchain technology, all you're doing is saying, yes, there's a more efficient way of doing commerce. We just didn't know commerce was going to be a part of the internet in the 80s and early 90s.
The entire crypto market shedding more than $1 trillion in value since Bitcoin's all-time high. Bitcoin still down around 50% from its record high of nearly 69,000 in November. What is behind this sell-off?
So I honestly don't know the reason. It's probably a myriad of factors, but I think the most interesting thing is that Bitcoin is now very tightly correlated with the higher growth, higher risk NASDAQ stocks. But I just want to point out to everybody, Bitcoin has had at least 50% declines 10 times since 2012. In the last year, we've had two 50% declines, obviously the most recent one, but also one in May of 2021. And so if you're long Bitcoin, you have to subject yourself to these type of volatility moves. And I'll just point out to people in Web 1, the same sort of situation happened for Amazon. And if you were wise enough and disciplined enough to hold Amazon and let that company take full advantage of the network effects associated with it, you did very well. And I think that's going to happen with Bitcoin. I just remind people what Jeff Bezos said at the 20th anniversary of the public offering of Amazon. People said, wow, the stock is so volatile. How were you able to hang in there? And he said, well, I was more focused on users and revenue growth. And for Bitcoin, since it's a network, you have to be focused on the wallet growth and the interaction among the people in the network. And so I ultimately think Bitcoin will be worth $500,000. It'll probably take 4 to 5 years. The ride will be rocky, but certainly worth it.
So Bitcoin valued at $500,000, $500,000 in 4 years' time. Does that correlate with 1 billion crypto users, 1 billion crypto wallets? Do you see that linked to the adoption curve? Yeah.
Yes, I do. And I think that there's a lot of research on that. And people say, well, how can you value Bitcoin? Fundamentally, you can value Bitcoin related to the network. Remember what Robert Metcalfe, the MIT professor, once said: one fax machine is probably worthless, but 100 million of them is worth something. The network itself is worth something. And so people mistake that when they do their fundamental analysis on Bitcoin.
So safe to say you're seeing this dip as a buying opportunity?
I see the dip as a buying opportunity, but I also will tell people that there'll be more buying opportunities in the future. And so you're better off, if you want to own this asset, to make a long-term strategic decision, buy the asset and don't look at the asset. Because remember, we're human beings. Everybody is a long-term investor, Michelle, until they have short-term losses. The minute they have short-term losses, they change their investment appetite and behavior.
All right. Well, look, to that long-term argument, one of the common investment cases for Bitcoin is that it's supposed to serve as a hedge against rising inflation. You yourself have called it an inflation hedge, but we're not seeing Bitcoin respond to this higher inflation data, now at a 40-year high. What's happened to the argument of it as an inflation hedge then?
Yeah, if I did call it an inflation hedge, and I don't know because I do a lot of interviews, I apologize for that, because I don't see it as an inflation hedge. What I see Bitcoin as is an early adopting technological asset. I see this as a technology that has 2.5% global saturation. And as a result of which, if you study other technologies like this, they come with a very high oscillation and very high volatility. Could Bitcoin become an inflation hedge? I believe the answer to that is yes, but I think people are predicting out into the future. I'll point out that Amazon is way less volatile today, 25 years after its IPO. 10 years from now, Bitcoin will be 23 years old. It'll be way less volatile in my prediction because there'll be more users, et cetera. And then maybe then, if you and I are both around, you can interview me and I can tell you that it's an inflation hedge, but it's not an inflation hedge yet. And I think that's a mistake when Bitcoin maximalists get out there and say that it's better than gold. It may be better than gold, but we have to let the network effects take place so that we can actually really see that and analyze it. And we need that to happen as well for it to be a quote unquote inflation hedge.
Okay, well, you yourself have actually said that Bitcoin is better at being gold than gold is.
Yes, I do believe that. I do believe that. And I can explain that to you. Bitcoin is better at being gold because of its portability, because of the technology is in limited supply. Remember, 65% of the available gold on planet Earth has been mined. That leaves you 35% more. And so there'll be increases in supply as prices come on. And what's unique about Bitcoin is that it's limited to the 21 million coins. Maybe 2 or 3 million of them have been lost. And so when you just look at it from a box ticking exercise about store of value, Bitcoin hits more of those than gold does. But again, it's early. And so it's an early adoption story. It's going to come with volatility. I believe when Bitcoin is mature, it will be quote unquote more valuable than gold because of all of the technical properties associated with it. So again, 10 years from now, I'll make a prediction that Bitcoin has a larger market capitalization than gold. And it took gold 5,000 years to get to its current market capitalization. Bitcoin will surpass that under 25 years from its inception.
So you're seeing Bitcoin as mainly drawing money from those that typically invest in gold, that money shifting into Bitcoin. That's where most of the investment into Bitcoin is coming from, at gold's expense?
I would say a large portion of it is there. Some of it is early adopters that love new technology stories. I would say there's a group of people that have made a decision that the central banks have become sloppy with our fiat currencies. I don't want to say anything too negative about Jerome Powell because I think he's by and large done a good job given the metrics that he's being measured by. But in a pandemic, we pushed out 42% more dollar volume. So just imagine that people are asking about inflation. Well, of course you're going to have inflation. If you added 42% more dollar volume to the Federal Reserve supply of money, the M2, well, then of course there's going to be inflation. I think people are looking at that and saying, okay, well, wait a minute, that's quite corruptible. Bitcoin, because of its decentralization, there's strength to that. It's less corruptible. I want to own this asset because if this continues, this sort of negative flywheel of Federal Reserve and other central bank monetary policy continues, I'm going to need to be in a safer haven. And I think as Bitcoin matures, it will become that.
We believe that the price will be tenfold of where it is today. So instead of 45,000, over 500,000.